Give me 1 second, setting up YouTube Live. All right, so if you have 2 blankets that we can use today, we'll keep them handy. Keep mine kind of folded off to the side. And today we're just going to come into a comfortable seat of your choice, whether you prefer to be kneeling, and you can use a blanket under your seat there. If you want to come into a cross-legged seat. If you're doing cross-legged, add a little something underneath your seat so that you can get yourself a little bit taller here. We want to have a little bit of the lift of the hips so that your knees can drop forward. And then relax the hands on top of the thighs. Close the eyes. Take a nice deep breath into your nose. Fill up. Open your mouth. Let that breath go. Do that again. Big breath in. Open mouth, exhale. Seal the lips. Inhale through your nose. Exhale out the nose. See if you can let your seat get a little heavier. Let the knees get a little heavier. Relax the hip flexors. And we'll continue the breath in and out of the nose from here. You want to make sure that the shoulders are able to slide back behind you and down away from the ears. And the elbows will stay soft. You don't need to do any kind of hard grabbing of the knees. You can soften the elbows, slide the hands back a little bit, and just feel the warmth of your hands into your legs. And these first few breaths are just to get us grounded. To put a little pin in where we are at this moment in time and place on this earth. And our lives continue to move and shake and rattle. So it's nice to slow down every once in a while, especially when you can really carve out the time. So you've already set aside this hour for yourself, so use it. Allow the thoughts that have been swirling around about whatever else needs to happen in your home or in communication. All of those things can be pushed away to the edges. We'll bring our attention to the breath. I am a naturally anxious person. I remember when I first moved to San Francisco to take my first job in advertising, I had gotten myself all worked up because I had this really difficult client and they were just coming back with changes every 5 minutes, and it just felt like everything was a fire to them. And I remember talking with my manager, and she, well seasoned in the industry, she said, you know what, look, our client sells iced tea. We're selling iced tea. We are not trying to cure any diseases here. We are not trying to solve the world's problem. We are selling iced tea. And when she put that into perspective for me, it just made it seem like, man, what was I worrying about? We're building a website, a web campaign for an iced tea brand. And the world will not collapse if we let that client wait 30 minutes, an hour before we rush into trying to respond back to them. And I've remembered that ever since. Whenever I start to feel flustered, anxious, worried, I reassess whether my feelings are over something small or if it's a true emergency, a true fire that needs to be addressed. And most of the time, it's nothing. It's iced tea. So if you have those moments where you feel like, oh, I really need to address this right now, I really need to take time to think about it right now. Instead, think about, does it really need to be done right now? Is it a big problem? Or is it something small that can wait? Because if we spend all of our energy addressing the small problems in life, we are left with nothing in us when it's time to rally for the big stuff. Let's take 3 more deep breaths here. Let the breath go. 2 more. And 1 more breath in. Good. Keeping your eyes closed or soft. Let's find child's pose. And if you want a little cushion under the head, feel free to bring your props toward the front of the mat. You'll take your knees nice and wide, bring your big toes together, sit the hips back toward the heels. You can reach the arms forward or reach the arms back. Let your forehead find the floor. Relax the shoulders away from the ears, soften the elbows. And if you're dealing with any headache from stress or from allergies, you might rock your head a little side to side, going from eyebrow to eyebrow. And we'll come back to just that grounding sensation, contact of the limbs against the floor. Your head either against a prop or all the way against the mat. Notice breath moving into the back body, into the ribs, into the sides, down into the belly. And then let everything soften on the exhale. Notice if you're clenching the teeth or tightening through the jaw, maybe open and close the mouth a few times or move your jaw side to side. Take about 5 more breaths here. Take your time with each breath. Try to lengthen out your exhale. One last deep breath in. And then bring the palms together. Bring your elbows just a little bit more narrow. We're going to bend the elbows so that you can take your thumb behind the head. You can start to feel stretch through the triceps. You might even slide the elbows a little more forward. Let your heart sink down. A little bit of a stretch into the upper back, into the shoulders. 3 deep breaths here. And release the hands down. We'll come up onto hands and knees. Move the props out of the way. Stack your shoulders over your wrists. Spread your fingers really wide. We're going to take a few rounds of cat-cow from here. You're going to tip your pelvis forward. Let your belly drop. Inhale, lengthen the heart forward. Push the ground away. Exhale, moving from the tailbone, rounding into the back. Let your head release. And then follow your own breath. And what I invite you to do as you move between these two poses is if there's a certain spot that needs just a little bit more time, or it might use a little bit of a side to side, make this a little bit more organic. You should be able to move based on what you feel in the body. And what you feel is going to be different from anybody else, including me. It's also a great spot to start to identify where exactly you might be feeling a lot of strain or tension, what might feel sore, what might be more open. And take a couple more breaths here. And then come back to a neutral spine. We're going to step your feet off of your mat. Go ahead and lift your hips and walk the hands to the back of the mat. Bend your knees as much as you need. The feet are wide. Once you get into a forward fold at the back of the mat, let the top of the head drop down. You shake your head no. Nod the head yes. And then option here to either grab opposite elbows, let everything dangle down toward the floor, or lace the fingers behind the head, bring your elbows toward each other, and then use the hands to add a little bit of weight to the back of the head. But your feet are strong here, your legs are strong here, they will hold you. They'll tell you where your balance is. We're just going to use gravity to help us traction out the spine, letting the head get super heavy. And this can add a little bit of a sway side to side if that feels good in the spine, or you can just keep it static and let everything hang. Be here for about 5 breaths. Feel that stretch in the back of the legs. You can bend your knees as much as you need. So if this is super tight in the hamstrings, don't lock out the legs. One more breath here. Release the hands. Go ahead and walk yourself back forward, bringing the knees back onto the ground. All right. We're going to keep the knees together, feet apart. And take whatever you have, whether that's blankets folded up or block. We're going to add some height between your ankles so that you can sit. Now, if you have really tight legs, you want a little bit higher of a setting here. Knees are together, feet are apart. You can have something between your legs here. And then we're going to sit back onto your prop and get really tall. Roll your shoulders back and behind, drop them down away from the ears, and close the eyes. Give yourself another deep breath in. And start to drop your right ear towards your right shoulder. Feel the opening through the left side of the neck. Take a breath in. And then really slowly, we're going to start to roll the head forward. We'll take a little pause when your chin is down towards your chest. Feel the stretch in the back of the neck, and then keep going until your head rolls all the way to the left ear toward left shoulder. And then we'll go back the way we came. Rolling the head through center, letting it get heavy. Taking it over to the right. 2 more times. Just like when we were moving through our cats and our cows, if there's a certain spot that needs a little extra time, or maybe a little extra movement to just kind of play into it, maybe it needs a little bit more stretch, you can always add that back in. Notice if your upper body's starting to curl in on you. I like this kneeling posture with a really high seat because it kind of forces your spine to have to stay tall. I'm going to bring everything back through center. Just give that a moment. Settle into that center line. 2 more breaths here. One more inhale. And let's come back forward and we'll bring our props to the front of the mat now. I recommend them kind of double stacked and folded so we have something nice and tall to work with. You're going to step your right foot to the right side front of the mat, and you'll have your props right here on the inside of the foot. Wiggle your left knee to the left a little bit so that you have plenty of room to kind of just find your balance. And then we're going to come on to the forearms, and we'll stay a little taller here. Normally when we're doing this in a big flowing class, we get as close to the floor as is comfortable, but we're going to keep our height a little bit taller. And if you still need more, grab, cushions, pillows, blocks, whatever you have handy. And we're going to keep your torso pointing down toward the floor. So a common thing that happens if the right hip is super, super tight is that you tend to lean to the left because then you feel less in the right hip. So I want you to try to keep the hips as level as you can. The chest is pointing down. And the setup, just letting the weight of the hips drop downward, should start to open this right hip. Start to feel some stretching sensation wrapping through the outside, into the glute, maybe into the low back. And we're going to give this a couple minutes. So we're going to really take our time with it. Don't feel like you have to go in at 100%. I would start with about 70% sensation here. And then just see where gravity and time and breath take you in these next few minutes. We tend to have a racing mind. This is a good spot to just slow the breath down, maybe even counting the breaths. These type of lunge stretches tend to do 2 things. If you're starting at 70 and then the hips are dropping from the help of gravity, is that it might intensify to 80 to 90, maybe even getting closer to that 100. And your mind will do 2 things. As it slowly deepens, it might become so intense that you're starting to border on pain. And what I recommend you do if you start to feel it is intolerable, it's not feeling good in the hips, is step back off. Maybe you shorten your stance a little, bring that left knee back in a little closer, or maybe you find a little bit more height. The other thing that can happen is your body might start to open and you finally relax into it to the point where you start to wander off mentally. Your mind stops paying attention to the sensations that are happening in the body, and you start going back into that kind of rat race mind. You create lists, or you start worrying, or you start dwelling on things. And if that's the case for you, you're still going to make a little bit of a readjustment. Maybe you need it a little bit longer in a stance. Maybe you need to just kind of change up the arms. But get yourself in a place where you can stay fully present in your body, following that breath, moving in and out. And be able to relax the parts of the body that don't need to be strong here. We're working legs here. We shouldn't feel any strength being gathered in the back, or in the jaw, or in the face. And I'm going to stay here for about 5 more breaths. And you're gonna gently start to press back up. Ooh, that was feeling intense. Bring your right knee back to meet with your left. This time, keep your knees together and toes together. We're just gonna sit onto the heels for a moment and feel whatever lingering sensations are happening through the hips and the legs. Give yourself another breath in. All right, come on to hands and knees. If you're still feeling kind of tight, maybe take the hips through some circles here. And then we're gonna set up on the other side. So move your props over to the right. Step your left foot forward. Start to find a good spot, starting position that'll give you about 70% sensation. Nothing super, super huge. And then when you're ready, you'll start to bring the arms onto your props. Stay a little taller than you normally would in a flowing yoga practice. And we'll reestablish the breath here. And bring the attention to what's happening through the hips, and making everything nice and level and even. I want you to reflect back on how your mind reacted when you got to a little bit more of that intense feeling when we had the right leg in front. And maybe your mind went straight to panic. Whoa, this is a lot. I don't like this. Maybe you felt anger. And know that those are all very normal feelings that come up. And most of what we do, especially in a really slow moving practice where we stay in poses for longer periods of time, is training our minds not to panic, not to jump straight to it's an emergency, but to assess it for a moment. And maybe it's just iced tea. Maybe it's not the big 911 moment. When we start to have a conversation with our body, it starts to get to a level of intensity that demands change. Your body will give you those signals. It'll advise you where to back off, where to adjust, maybe moving a foot somewhere, a knee somewhere. Maybe it's a reminder to release any gripping of the teeth or in the fists. And if your mind is having a hard time getting to that place, we can almost use our breath to guide the mind along. So even taking a deliberate slow inhale and an even slower exhale will do the trick to remind the mind that your nervous system is a-okay, that you are safe, you're not being chased by a bear. And when the breath can regulate, the nervous system regulates, and the mind will follow. Here for 3 more breaths. Gently start to press back up. Woo. Bring your left knee to meet the right. Sit onto the heels and let all of that just kind of tingle and marinate. Give yourself a few breaths here. And from here, scoot your hips over to one side, doesn't matter which side, you'll swing your legs around. Hands are gonna go behind you. Step your feet as wide as your mat. We'll just windshield wiper the knees side to side. Get some movement back through those hips. All right, the next time that your knees are to the right, turn towards you guys. We'll just drop them over to the right, and we're gonna press ourselves up. So this position here is called deer pose. And I have my right foot against my left knee, and my left knee is bent. Now, if you have tight hips, this left hip is probably still lifted, and we want to try to encourage that sit bone down. If it's still not happening, what I recommend is grab a blanket and stuff it under the right side, the side that's lower, just on that right side, and see if that encourages the left hip to drop just a little more. Now, it doesn't have to touch the floor, just know that that's the direction that we're moving toward. Okay. So once you are set up in your deer legs, we're going to keep the torso turned forward. So it's going to be somewhere like past your right foot here. Hands can be on the floor, they can be on top of the legs, whatever allows you to kind of just settle into this. And then we're going to close the eyes. So we just had some really big external hip openings as we work those lunges, we worked the backs of the hips. Now we're working this internal rotation by having our left foot sticking out to the left. We're just going to let this settle for a few breaths. And I want you to notice as you breathe here, what is resisting? A lot of times for me, because we don't do a ton of internal rotation as a way to kind of stretch the hip, this might feel a little foreign to you. This might feel a little awkward. So just be cognizant of that. I'm just noting that as an observation. We're not trying to fix anything per se. We're just allowing this position to settle into the body. Slow down the breath and see what gravity and time can do for us. We'll let this left hip just get heavier and heavier. The more we can release. And we'll be here for about 5 more breaths. Flutter the eyes open. You can lean back behind you. Let's windshield wiper the knees again, side to side. Ooh, you can really feel that. All right, this time, the next time that your knees are over to the left, we're gonna set up our deer pose on the left side. And you're gonna notice that the hips are a little different one side to the other. So my right hip is less happy with me, doesn't wanna open as much. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of lift underneath my left hip. And that's gonna allow my right hip to have just a little bit more room to drop. I'm gonna keep my torso turned forward just past my left foot here. And find a comfortable spot for your hands. We'll sit up tall and we'll breathe here. So a lot of times these hip positions that we do are not ones that we normally do. When we just sit in a chair, we're standing, we tend to be pretty kind of closed hipped for walking and all that. So healthy hips require our hips to be able to move in all different directions. And especially these rotations, these internal and external rotations, you want to kind of pair them together. So we'll do a different external rotation after this. And as you're at home, kind of working through your own aches and pains, think about how your body needs to move if it doesn't normally move in a certain direction during your day. So a lot of times what I recommend to people who work in an office is even if you're sitting at a desk, your feet are planted, take like a figure four, cross an ankle over a thigh, allow for that external rotation of the hip, maybe even add a forward fold when you're in your chair. You can even lean against your desk. Do it on both sides, and then be sure to move these hips in different circles, different directions. You can save the weird stuff for at home, and most of us are at home now, so it's okay. You can do all these weird stretches while you work at home or as you're getting things done at home. We're gonna give this about 5 more breaths. This is allowing for this right hip to drop into the ground. It's okay if it's still floating. One more breath here. Flutter the eyes open. We'll lean back onto the hands. Windshield wiper the knees side to side. All right, we're gonna come into butterfly pose here. So soles of the feet together, let your knees go out. We want the feet a little bit more forward than what we would do in a flowing class. And then options here. If you want a little bit more height, we are gonna take this into forward fold. Give yourself something, some cushions, some blankets, whatever you want to lean forward on. Keep that on top of the feet or just forward of the feet. Now, knees wise, we want to just make sure that they're feeling happy, that you're not feeling any strain in the front of the knees. And you might even lean forward a little so you can pull the sits bones back behind you. So you want to feel those 2 pokey bones in the bum all the way to the floor. All right, before we take our fold, you're gonna bring hands either to the floor or in front of your shins. And we're just gonna lengthen, take almost like a cow pose here. Go ahead and round on the exhale, a little bit of cat pose while seated. Let's do that again. Inhale, roll the heart through. Exhale, round. You can really use the hands to kind of lengthen the back body. And then bring it back to neutral. We're going to start to take our fold. So you could set this up kind of like what we did when we were in our lunge. Kind of resting the forearms there. You might find over time that this starts to open up for you. You could get a little closer and closer to those blankets or closer to the floor. So I'm going to kind of just leave it up to you how you're feeling in the hips. Make sure that you feel supported in the front of the body. And then take your attention inward. Slow that breath down. Maybe even count your breaths. Notice sensation through the hips. Whatever you need to do to stay present here, whether that's counting the length of your breaths or how many breaths you've taken, feel free to add that as long as it doesn't take up so much of your thinking that it kind of overwhelms your other senses. Notice if your breath gets stuck in any one spot. And try to smooth out the breath. Five more breaths here. And then we'll gently start to press back up. Oof. All right. Bring the knees together. And step the feet out. Knock your knees together. Just going to press them together. Lean back onto the hands. Open the chest. Just give that a moment. Again, we just went from a big external rotation. We're using a slight internal rotation as our neutralizing posture. All right, we're going to take your right leg out to the side, about 45 degrees. Left foot's going to come into your inner right thigh. We'll keep your blankets here handy. I'm going to actually stack them on top of my legs. I'm going to use a little bit of height here. So what this is going to look like is we're going to start with a little bit of a twist. You're going to turn your torso to your left knee. Your right foot, I'm a little less worried if it's flexed or not. Just kind of let it hang out here. And then I'm going to bring my right arm onto my blanket. This is a little high for me. I'm short, so I need them lower. So your right arm is going to come onto the blanket. You're going to bend your elbow. You're going to rest your head against your fist. So now we're nice and supported here. The torso is going to start to open to the left. And then we're going to take this left arm up and over, and we're just going to drop it on top of your head. So it's going to look really lazy and kind of slumped in, and that's okay. What I want you to feel here is a really big opening through the left side body. So from the soft tissue of the side, and then starting to open through the left ribs, through your armpit. And then this left arm's just kind of rests on top of the head, be a little added weight here. The right arm here is holding you in place. And then again, we're going to use gravity, time, and breath to help us deepen into this side bend. Notice how sensation changes as you breathe. And keep the belly soft and the shoulders relaxed. One more deep breath here. Move your left arm first, and then gently press yourself back, recenter. Ooh. Just bring everything back to neutral. Give yourself a moment here before we switch sides. You should feel quite a lot, kind of tingling, stretching, opening on that left side. All right. Start to work to the other side. So left leg's going to go out about 45 degrees. Bring your right foot to your inner left thigh. Set up your props here. We're going to start by a gentle twist of the torso toward your right knee, just so we get ourselves nice and open. And then when you're ready, the left arm will bend. Use your fist as a little prop for your head. And then we'll take your right arm up and over, a lazy arm, just let it rest on top of the head. I love these long passive holds for side bends, especially if you kind of wake up in the morning and feel like maybe you slept on the wrong side of the body. If you tend to be a side sleeper, if you're feeling just a little crunched up in the back. Again, these are movements that we don't normally take in a day. You might take a twist every now and then if you are one of those people that like cracks the back, right? Taking twists is something that we naturally think of, but hanging out in a side bend probably isn't at the top of your list. And I'm going to try to encourage you to move it up a little more because it opens up areas that just get crunched up, that don't get to see a lot of space. We'll be here for about 5 more breaths. And gently come back up, moving this right arm out of the way first. And then bringing everything back upright. Bring it back to center, let everything neutralize. Just feel what's happening on the side of the body here. One more breath in. Let's start to settle down into the floor. What I'm going to recommend is whatever kind of props you're using. If you're using those 2 blankets, we're going to double stack them. Keep them next to you for now. We're going to roll down onto the back and place the feet on the floor. And then you're going to lift your hips just enough to slide your props underneath you. And you want to feel it holding your pelvis. So nothing hanging off with the tailbone or getting stuck in the low back. And then we're going to take the feet as wide as the mat, knock the knees together. Let everything else relax into the floor. You can turn your palms up toward the ceiling, get the shoulder blades relaxed down. Feel the center line of the body. Inner thighs are coming together, knees are coming together, feet holding you. Let the pelvis get really heavy here. The props are there to hold you, support you. Take one more breath in. And then set your feet back to hips width distance. All right, we're going to shift your blankets over to your right so that it's only underneath the right half of your body. So your left booty cheek is going to hang and just kind of float, and that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to tuck your right toes underneath your left thigh and see if you can catch it with your left hand. If not, don't worry. You can always let the foot just float. And then you're going to drop your right knee forward. So I have right foot tucked underneath my left leg, holding onto it with my fingers, and then dropping the right knee forward and down. If you can't hold the toes, that's okay too. You can just kind of use your left foot to catch the foot, right foot from floating away from you. And the lift of the right hip is just going to add a little bit more stretch on the top of your right hip flexor. Your right knee is going forward and down, whether it touches the ground or not, doesn't matter. The right foot's tucked underneath the left leg. We're just going to let that right knee get as heavy as it wants to be, as heavy as it can be. And that's going to help open up the right hip flexor. You might even feel some of this in the belly. You might feel this all the way closer to the knee. Maybe just a tiny bit of it into the right quad. We're going to let gravity do some work here. Notice if there's any resistance to the opening. Sometimes the glutes reactivate and think it's helping by holding the leg in a certain way. And just practice letting go of the breath on each exhale, letting go of any extra worry, tension that might build up. And try to surrender to the pose. 3 more breaths here. Press your left foot into the mat so you have something kind of stabilize against. Release your right foot, and we're going to just hug this right knee into the chest for a moment. You might even just move your knee a little side to side, moving through that hip. And then bring your right foot down. All right, we're going to slide all of your props over to the left so that it's holding just that left hip. Your right booty cheek is gonna kind of float and hang. And we're gonna do the same kind of exercise. You're gonna tuck your your left foot underneath your right leg. See if you can catch it with the fingers. If not, just kind of prop it behind your right heel. And then let your left knee drop forward and down. And start to feel that stretching sensation on top of the left hip flexor. The right foot is just a prop, so you shouldn't be pushing back into that right leg too much. It's just there to hold you in place. Stay for 3 more deep breaths in. And now press your right foot into the floor, give you some stability. We're going to unwind that left foot, hug your left knee in, give it a little bit of a wobble. And set your left foot down. We can move these blankets out of the way. And roll the back all the way onto the floor. Hug both knees in. Take a gentle rock side to side against your low back. Good, and then extend your left leg long. We're gonna take our twist from here. Right knee's gonna go all the way across to the left. Scoot your hips over to the right a little. You can let this right arm fall open, or if that's too intense, you can rest your right hand on top of your right hip. And whichever way feels better on the neck, whether you're turning the head toward the knee or away from the knee. And then we soften. Last breath here. Roll back onto the back. Reset the hips. Give your knees a hug in. Ready for the other side. Extend your right leg long. We'll take the left knee across. Move your hips over to the left. Knees pointing to the right. Your choice of left arm positioning, head positioning. Last breath here. Roll everything back through center. Reset the hips. Hug the knees in. You can play with taking the knees wide, even taking it into happy baby, grabbing for the feet, adding a gentle rock side to side. And then we'll get ready to set up for Shavasana. If you are having kind of some back issues, what I recommend is giving yourself a little bit of a prop here. I like a double stack blanket or a bolster behind me. Bring it all the way up to the base of the spine. Make sure your seat is on the floor. Rolling the spine down, allowing the arms to open. The legs can be soles of the feet together, cross-legged, or legs long. If you are feeling ungrounded, feeling nervous, anxious, worried, what I like to do then is set up in a more traditional Shavasana, legs long, arms long, and then set heavy items, blankets, sandbags, cushions, whatever you got, right over the belly. Just letting that weigh you down. So I'm going to leave your final pose up to you, whatever feels best. Take up some space here, soften the lights. Allow for the feet to flop open if you're taking them long. Allow your shoulder blades to relax, whether it's against a prop or down into the floor. Maybe you rock your head a little side to side, releasing any tension that might still be stuck in the neck. And then we'll let the back of the skull rest into the ground. We're going to take 3 cleansing breaths here together. Big inhale through your nose. Open mouth, exhale, release. Do that again. Big breath in. Open mouth, exhale. Last time. Breathe in. And breathe out. Relax the breath. Allow it to come back to just a normal breathing pattern. It doesn't have to be any kind of controlled manner. If you're taking the props on top of the body option, you might feel them move gently as your belly and your chest expand. And allow the eyes to soften. You might notice shadows or colors or shapes still making an imprint through your eyelids. And we want to get to a place where we just notice and let them float by. The same with our thoughts. There might be imprints left over from what's happened today, anything that might still be lingering in your mind. And instead of dwelling on any one thing, just let them float by like clouds in the sky. And we'll take these next few minutes having no other obligation to lie here and breathe. Start to deepen your breath. Wiggle your fingers and your toes. Circle your wrists and your ankles. We'll reach the arms overhead, full body stretch, yawn, and move your jaw around. Hug your knees into the chest. We'll gently roll over to your left, coming into fetal position. Just give yourself a few breaths on your side. Using your hands for support, start to press up and find a comfortable cross-legged seat. Keep your eyes closed. Bring the palms to touch at heart center. We'll seal our practice tonight with a single Om. First, take a full breath in through your nose. Sigh that breath out. Inhale the chant. Om. Namaste. How did we do, everybody?